Everyone, and welcome to another edition of Superhero Pantheon. My name is Jerome and I am again here with Brian. You can find him on Twitter at Brian to Brain. You can find me on Twitter at JeromeC1985. Make sure that you go leave a 4 or 5-star review, as we are part of the Real World Podcasting Network. Doing so helps people discover this show and the great work that the folks are doing. So we're going to start up top here with a bit of an announcement, kind of how this podcast is going to be changing over the next couple months. So, as people who do follow me on Twitter, friends with me on Facebook, have access to my phone number, I have received and gotten a new job back in Chicago. So, I will no longer be working in Memphis, Tennessee, which I'm very excited about. By the time you're listening to this, I'll actually be a couple weeks into this new gig, for which I'm very excited about. But this new gig is going to be taking up a great deal more of my time. And this podcast is obviously not the top priority in my life because I have bills to pay, and this show is not paying for those bills. But I still want to do weekly podcasts. So the podcasts with Kevin Ford are going to continue. Kevin and I will still be recording once a month, and we will be continuing our series, Canceled Too Soon. And next week, in fact, we will be discussing The Critic. And the first Tuesday of every month for the rest of 2022 will be Kevin and I talking about a TV show that was canceled too soon. Now, where does that leave Brian and I? I think one of the challenges that I have is watching a 2-hour movie, hosting this show, and then editing it. Editing is a time-consuming process. Basically, if you assume that, Brian and I are recording for an hour, you have to figure it's going to take at least 90 minutes to 2 hours to watch whatever we're watching, plus another 30 to 45 minutes to put notes together, plus, 1 to 2 hours of editing and putting the show together to make it not sound like crap. So it is a bit of a time-consuming process. And in order to streamline that process a little bit and make things easier on me, one of the things that we have decided is that for the next little while, Brian and I are going to be going back into the archives, going into the vault, so to speak, the Disney Plus vault, and we are going to be taking a look at an animated TV show that has great significance for both of us. That would be the 1994 animated edition of Spider-Man. So starting in 2 weeks, we will be recording 3 episodes a month. And on each episode of Superhero Pantheon, we are going to be discussing 2 episodes of the Spider-Man on any given podcast. And that is all we are committing to right now. We may get into other animated TV shows. Not Batman. That's already being done by Matt Waters. You can actually read his write-ups, the Matt Signal, on Enter the Real World, which I encourage you to do. But Brian and I are kind of going into territory that nobody else has gone into. Mike and Matt have discussed the X-Men animated series before, but Spider-Man is kind of territory that has not been covered, and that is what we are going to do for the next few months. And we will also be incorporating the movies that we are seeing in theaters as well. The Batman, which incredibly comes out March 4th, knock on wood, plus Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, as well as other superhero projects that are coming out over the course of the next few months. So I wanted to put this announcement up top just so we can explain kind of how the podcast is going to be changing. And although we are not going to get to be reviewing movies as much, Brian, I know that you are excited to go back and rewatch the animated Spider-Man.
Yeah, we've been trying to figure out how to incorporate this for like the last, 3-4 years, because the way that we've been structuring Superhero Pantheon, it's been constantly movies and then TV movies offhand. But this is the first time, since Watchmen, I guess, because Watchmen was the only show we kind of tackled. But I don't know if we're going to actually rank these in the Pantheon or not. I think we're just going to go season to season and then just rank them, because we've been really wanting to tackle this, because especially with like the Spider-Man 3 coming out recently, Tobey Maguire coming back and Andrew Garfield coming back, all this Spider-Man love. I've been really dying to watch it again, even though I already rewatched it like 2 or 3 times already. Even when it came back on Disney Plus, I can't wait to watch it again because there's so many little things and details that Sam Raimi takes, that John Watts takes, and they kind of throw them in there, and then you kind of remember like nostalgia, like, oh my God, that kind of reminds me of the show or whatever, you know what I mean? And to me, Spider-Man, he was always a college kid to me because of the show. You know what I mean? I know a lot of people kind of get like heated, like he's a high school kid, like in the comics or whatever. But to me, he's a college kid, and that's kind of how I see him, and then more relate to him because he's just trying to balance that out, and that's what the brilliance of that show is him trying to balance it out. And I think that's what I love about that show is that constant balance, and it's always trying to be broken by a villain or something like that. So I'm very excited. And I think it starts with the Sinister Six, as I recall. So it's going to start off pretty similar because we see Doc Ock starting the Sinister Six. So it's going to be very familiar. And then, of course, we're going to talk about Morbius. He appears in the show as well. Venom, Blade, they all appear. So it's going to be fun with all the little crossovers and stuff like that. We'll even talk about the X-Men crossover that I'm sure they talked about because, I don't know if we mentioned this before, but all the Marvel shows created in the 90s, they're all in the same universe. You know what I mean? They all cross over. They're all in the same universe. So this idea of the Marvel characters crossing over actually started in the 90s with the Marvel TV animated shows. So it's going to be fun to look back at all that stuff and look at all the crossovers. So I'm really excited. It's a little bit of a change of pace, but you got to appreciate Disney Plus for uploading these in HD. So it's going to be awesome to look at these in HD. And I'm very excited, especially to see Morbius. Because I think Morbius, I don't know. We'll see what happens. He might be a babyface.
Yeah, we will not be talking about Morbius for a little bit of time because it is coming out exclusively to theaters. And I don't believe that I'm going to be interested in going to the theaters much in the month of January. So we will eventually record an episode, but it will not be for a while. All right, let's get into what we're actually doing today. On this podcast, we are going to be putting people into our superhero pantheon. We've put a lot of movies into the superhero pantheon. We've ranked them. We've given them scores. And some of the movies that, we have put into the superhero pantheon include the 1978 Superman, the 2008 Iron Man, 3 Avengers movies, 2 Captain America movies. We've even put a DCEU movie into the superhero pantheon, that being Wonder Woman. We've also put a number of X-Men movies, some Batman movies, including the entire Christopher Nolan trilogy. But tonight we are going to do something a little bit different. We are going to put people into the pantheon. And when I say people, this means actors. It also means producers, directors, writers, maybe even composers as well. These are all people that could possibly go into the superhero pantheon. Now, there are a couple of rules that we are going to follow. One of them is pretty arbitrary. One of them is not so arbitrary. I'm going to start with the non-arbitrary one. So it is tough to assess moral character when it comes to the lists like these. But Brian and I have made the choice that certain individuals are not going to go into the pantheon based on, let's just say, their personal behaviors. And the 2 most prominent names, 2 people who very conceivably could have gone onto this list of kind of people who deserve to be in the pantheon, those would be Bryan Singer and Joss Whedon. Both logical names. They're basically disqualified for their personal behavior. So they will not be going in. But most everybody else is going to be a fair game in terms of kind of the history of superhero cinema. The other rule is, so in order for somebody to go into the pantheon, it must be Brian and I, we have to agree. So it has to be unanimous. Both of us have to say, yes, they belong in. However, there is an exception. Brian and I will each get to put one person in over the objections of the other. Okay, so for example, this is not going to happen, but let's just say Brian wanted to put Robert Downey Jr. into the pantheon and I did not. Brian, realizing what an idiot I am for making that choice, would, of course, put Robert Downey Jr. into the superhero pantheon. So that's just an example of what's going to happen, and it spices things up because Brian and I will really have to think carefully about who we would want to go in over the objection of the other, and we will keep a running list. And at the end, I will say what the full list is. So Brian, my list is longer than yours, but I hope you're excited to kind of get to it.
Yeah, the thing is like I was thinking like top tier. You know, you mentioned as an example the 1996 Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame. I'm like, okay, so we're going super top tier. So I kind of limited the names. I didn't want to go name so many names from like, you know, Marvel or DC or whatever. I kind of wanted to make it an elite list. That's why my list is like half the size of yours, but that doesn't mean we can't agree and still put the people in. And it also means that I probably forgot a few people here and there. Like I'm looking at my list now and I definitely forgot like one or two names that are just popping in my head right now. But we're probably going to have a lot of crossover and we're probably going to have like, oh yeah, I completely forgot about that kind of moment. So totally ready for this. And I don't know how you want to start it, but I guess we're going to start chronologically? So to speak?
I think the only way to start is now there is a name that may actually go before this. But in the spirit of how this podcast started, we started this podcast, the very first movie that we discussed was the 1978 Superman. So we're gonna kind of go back and forth with the names. But for Superman, I want to induct the following into the superhero pantheon, and then we can kind of discuss. Christopher Reeves, of course, playing Superman. Margot Kidder, Lois Lane. Gene Hackman, Lex Luthor. Richard Donner, the director of that film, and who unfortunately has passed away last year. John Williams, the composer and the creator of one of the most iconic superhero themes of all time. And the writer, Mario Puzo.
Okay, so I actually had Donner and Reeves. So we're on that same page. I didn't put the others there because I wasn't even thinking like, you know, composer and writers and stuff like that. But I agree on everyone except maybe Puzo. But I don't know, because I love The Godfather, but this is not about The Godfather. It's about just strictly writing. And it is a good script, but I don't know if it's like an elite script. You know what I mean? So how do you feel about that one?
So we have agreed, though, that we are going to put Christopher Reeves, Margot Kidder, Gene Hackman, Richard Donner, and John Williams in.
Yeah, that seems to be like totally obvious because now, like, yeah, because Margot Kidder for me was like second tier, so that's why I didn't put her in the first ballot, so to speak. But if we're gonna do it now, let's do it now. And I totally agree with that because she kind of sets the standard.
I mean, for me, it's like the movie doesn't work without their chemistry. Like their chemistry is really at the heart of what makes that movie work. Like it's not a bombastic action thriller like the MCU movies have become, and like a lot of CGI and a lot of action. So it really comes down to their relationship and how much you believe it. And those two have such incredible chemistry together that I think every other Superman movie is inferior, specifically because they don't really have as good of a rapport together. So for me, I mean, I think the first five, this is the only way that I could have gone. And I know that Gene Hackman is, I don't even know if I would put him on like a 10 best list, but the fact that he is one of the biggest movie stars of the 1970s and is in this movie as kind of the first super villain, I think there's a lot of historical significance to that. And for that reason, I'm a firm believer that he belongs. And one of the best stories that I read after the death of Richard Donner is when Gene Hackman said he would not shave his mustache to play the role, and Richard Donner wore a fake one and said he would shave it as well. And that's a fun movie moment. And I mean, look, Richard Donner, I think he absolutely has to go on this list because he is also associated as a producer with the X-Men franchise. But of course, the primary reason that he is going in is because he directed Superman 1 and sort of directed Superman 2 as well. There is the Donner cut that exists, but like superhero movies, like he very much set the template, and he set the template in such a way that I think a lot of superhero movies are still chasing this high to this day. I think a lot of movies owe a lot to the original Superman. Like, I think about Wonder Woman that came out in 2017. So much of that movie felt like a direct homage to Superman. And the John Williams score, I mean, how many times have we heard that iconic Superman score? Like, not just in other superhero movies. It's been used in Justice League. It's been used in Space Jam 2, for God's sakes, which, you know, you could roll your eyes, but there's so much cultural significance to the John Williams score. I cannot imagine not putting him in. And the funny thing is that that's the only superhero movie that John Williams ever scored is Superman 1, because he's mostly known for Spielberg and George Lucas. So the fact that he's basically getting on for this one theme is pretty amazing. But it is an iconic theme, I would say.
Definitely. So I totally agree with all that. And for Margot Kidder, for me, I feel like a lot of the Lois Lane since then, I've been trying to imitate her. And I know that sounds kind of like, well, that's kind of what the character is or whatever. But I feel like she's like, you know how like Donner set the table, Christopher Reeve set the table. You know what I mean? Like they all set the groundwork for what these superheroes were to come. But I feel like Lois Lane, she's like the best Lois Lane, I think. I can't even think of another one other than maybe some of the animated voice actresses. But I feel like she nails it so much because the thing with Amy Adams is that she was, I don't know, she wasn't like too aggressive enough. I feel like Margot Kidder had this aggressive go-getterness to her that I think Lois Lane is all about that. And I think she encompasses that the most because now you see like the Lois and show now, or not, Lois and Superman show now, she's more of that motherly type. You know what I mean? She's not as like a go-getter. You know what I mean? I like the whole go-getter thing, and she's like kind of ruthless and a little cutthroat. But that's kind of like the nature of, you know, being a woman reporter in a male-dominated world. So I think Margot Kidder deserves a lot more. But again, I didn't put her on the initial list because I was thinking second tier, second ballot. But Mario Puzo, I gotta disagree with because I just feel like it's just one script he did in the superhero world, and it's a B+ script, but it's not like a A+ home run that, you know, like a Dark Knight script is. You know what I mean? So I think I got to disagree on that one.
That's totally fair, but I think we have acknowledged the important individuals from Superman. I also want to, this is not for the purposes of putting him into the list, Brian, but I do want to, I don't know if we discussed this even on the podcast, but Ned Beatty passed away in 2021, and I know that you were a huge fan of his, so I also wanted to acknowledge that because he is an important part of the 1978 Superman film as well.
Absolutely. And of course, Deliverance. I mean, he can play a lot, like a wide range, man. And I love like a good character actor that does a good wide range of stuff. And he does the laughs and the fearfulness. And there's probably a bunch of movies I'm not even thinking of right now that Ned Beatty was in, but he totally has an influence on any movie that he's in. So I'm glad we're shouting him out now, and rest in peace, because he had a great career. And even though he wasn't a star player, he made a lot of influence. Like he influenced a lot of the movies he was in, basically. So what's what next on your list? Because I think we have the same name that we're gonna want to go back, kind of backtrack to chronologically, right? I think
we both want to say Adam West, right?
Yes, because technically he's the second Batman ever, but he was technically the first theatrical Batman, I think, because the serials are not really like full movies, right? So technically he is the first theatrical Batman too, I think, right?
Yes, I would say they are theatrical in nature, but they're not movies. I know that might be parsing it out a little too finely. And I think Adam West is probably more so known for the Batman series, but because he was in a movie, I think he is one of the most iconic, important figures in superhero movies. Like, there were no superhero movies or TV shows except for Superman, and this was a primetime series. Yeah, it only went 3 years, but at one point, this was one of the most watched TV shows in the United States. You're talking about a time when 30 to 40 million people were watching one show per week, and like now you don't even get 10 million viewers to watch most network TV shows. So Adam West absolutely has to and belongs on this list. On a show that was very silly, had a lot of gags to it, Adam West played it stone cold serious, and he belongs on this list. So I think we agree.
Yeah, and not to mention the fact that it was not one episode a week for Batman. It was 2 episodes a week on back-to-back nights with a cliffhanger. So you're talking a 45-minute fresh every week. You know what I mean? Like for 3 years, and all those sets and all that. You know what I mean? It was just a lot. It was very historical, and we got Bruce a crossover with Bruce Lee and the Green Hornet. So all that kind of stuff was going on. So I'm glad we were both on the same wavelength in terms of this, because I feel like he's definitely deserves to be on it. I don't know about the Robin of that show, but I think out of all the people in that show, he's probably the only one. Maybe some of the producers, but there's a bunch of producers on that show that kind of left and went. So if we're going with one person, obviously it's Adam West. I think chronologically moving down moving further through the list, for me, I got Michael Keaton, Tim Burton, and Jack Nicholson, and I don't know if you want to add a little to that, but those are my top three.
So I was going to propose that there's another. So Michael Keaton is on my list. I have one more Batman, but we'll get to that in a second. I completely agree with you that Tim Burton, for better and for worse, belongs on this list. And maybe that is a bit surprising to people, because I think we are kind of cold on Batman Returns, and there are significant flaws, let's say, with the 1989 Batman movie. But you certainly cannot argue that he created a very specific aesthetic. He is somebody who I think there is a perception that, we need to rescue Batman from not being as campy. And it's funny because I think that movie in hindsight is actually a bit on the campy side, but obviously not to the degree that we are talking about the Adam West Batman. And I don't know that it necessarily needed to be rescued from being so campy. In fact, I would kind of like Batman to going back to having a little bit of fun and not being super serious. But yeah, Tim Burton belongs on this list. Michael Keaton. I mean, people are not looking forward to the Flash movie because of the Flash. They are looking forward because they saw the ears. That's literally the reason that people are looking forward to Michael Keaton returning as Batman and probably getting the score from the 1989 Batman in that as well. I also want to point out that Michael Keaton is not only going in as Batman, but we cannot forget that he is probably one of the best MCU villains of all time, playing the Vulture. And that is another reason that he actually belongs on this list. So even if you don't buy that he belongs for Batman, I would say if he was borderline, like if you want to make that argument, which I wouldn't, I would say Spider-Man pushes him over the top.
Yeah, for sure. And with Tim Burton, I feel like he directed two of the most iconic looking Batman movies, because despite how you feel about Batman Returns, a lot of people love it because it's this thing to celebrate as a Christmas movie, which is totally cool, because like I totally dig into that too. And it's not like I don't enjoy the movie. It's fun. I feel like it's been like really memeable and gifable lately because of like social media, and like a lot of the visuals from that movie is very like memeable and gifable. So, and then of course you got the first movie, which is very iconic in its own right. So Tim Burton directing two iconic movies totally deserves, I feel, despite how you feel about his aesthetic and the way he kind of approaches things. I feel like the first two movies, that aesthetic was very distinctive to what his vision of Batman was, and I was pretty into that vision because it's very like borderlines to the cartoon, and it kind of almost looks like the cartoon, and then you got to play with that Tim Burton aesthetic that you get in like in Edward Scissorhands or whatever. I think that aesthetic really, really works, and I'm glad that we're going back to that, because that's what I know we're looking forward to, seeing Michael Keaton in the bat suit and all that stuff. But I'm really looking forward to seeing the aesthetic, because if they're really going back to that specific Earth with that Batman and that Bruce Wayne, they got to have a Gotham City that looks exactly like the Tim Burton universe. So I'm hoping that they go through like a drive-through, or like they drive by the city of Gotham City, and you see this Tim Burton aesthetic come back. And that's kind of what I'm more looking forward to be honest, because you can't just like bring back Michael Keaton's Batman without bringing back that look. So credit to Tim Burton for that, because I feel like he's going to get a little bit more of like a shine, and like some more probably, viral articles going around that time when that comes out, saying like, oh my God, they brought back this, Gotham City that Tim Burton was dreaming about in 1988. So I'm glad we're including him. Jack Nicholson, I feel, is kind of like, I don't know. I mean, he was in the one movie, right? And it's very iconic as well, but it's more so like the contract that I'm just blown away by. And Jerome knows what I'm talking about, but it's just the fact that when he signed on to play the Joker, He was going to take a percentage of every Batman movie ever. And whether it was like a 1% or whatever it was, 1% of like billions is like a great paycheck for Jack Nicholson just sitting at home doing nothing. You know what I mean? So kudos to him and his agent. Kudos to him for taking the role and kind of being like the co-headliner with Michael Keaton. And the performance is iconic, as he said, and he even warned Heath Ledger of what was to come being the Joker. So, very historical. And just that contract alone just blows my mind every time.
I mean, I think he changed the game in a lot of ways and really got a lot of actors to maybe rethink merchandising and things of that nature, that you're not just getting paid for your work, but that you also have to get paid for, what the movie is producing in terms of merchandise and action figures and all that business. And, Jack Nicholson essentially got paid $50 million in 1989 money to play Jack Nicholson in a lot of ways, but it's still very memorable. It's still a really important part to the movies. In some ways, I think it's kind of a bad thing, because I think it set the precedent that the Batman movies, especially those first four, are so much more about getting these big stars to play the villains, as opposed to playing as opposed to putting the emphasis on the Batmen. So I think that in some ways it kind of set a bad precedent, but that does not fall onto the shoulders of Jack Nicholson. I think if you're starting a list like this, then for the contract and the fact that, he is lending his name, just like Gene Hackman did back in 1978, I mean, of course, Jack Nicholson has to go in because it also established the Joker as an important cinematic character. If you just hired, somebody who is 25 to 30% the star that is Jack Nicholson, then I don't know that Batman 1989 has a lot of success. I think Jack Nicholson is somebody who maybe a lot of people have forgotten about, because he hasn't been in a movie in 10 years, and he hasn't been a huge movie star since probably the late 90s, when, As Good as It Gets is arguably his last really big movie in terms of award contendership and kind of where it's known for his acting, and not being in that crappy Adam Sandler movie. So it's funny to think that Jack Nicholson was such a huge movie star in the 70s and 80s. He had his big run, and he's just basically been living the life of luxury over the course of the last 10 years. And I mean, I certainly can't say I blame him. If I was in his position, all I would do is go to Lakers games and sit courtside as well. So I certainly can't blame him for that. There is one more person from the Tim Burton universe that I believe should go in, and that is Michelle Pfeiffer, who plays Catwoman. I think Batman Returns is not a great movie. The other thing is that I think this list is going to suffer in a lot of ways from not a lot of female representation as of yet, because we really haven't gotten a lot of great beefy superhero roles for women. So I think it is important to acknowledge, the Margot Kidders and the Michelle Pfeiffers, because of the importance that they have played in these movies. I think Michelle Pfeiffer is outstanding as Catwoman. I really hope that there is a rumor that she's going to be in the Flash movie. I'm really hoping that she is. But there is also the fact that she is a part of the Ant-Man movies. So we also have to acknowledge that. And I think Michelle Pfeiffer should go in. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I was hesitant to put her on the list, but I was going for like the top first ballot Hall of Fame, but I totally agree, because I was thinking like, man, she's an Ant-Man as well. I hope that she's got more to do in the future, because I feel like she's a great like on-screen teacher role, especially if she has powers that she can control. She can teach these young Avengers how to, control their powers or whatnot. So I think that having her in the MCU, especially right now, is very key. And I know not a lot of people are like thinking about that, but for me, I think she's going to be a great teacher, because I feel like Michael Douglas, what we've seen of him is Hank Pym. He's not really like the mentor role, but I feel like, Janet Van Dyne could totally be that mentor role that, that I feel like the MCU kind of needs right now. We talked about elder statesmen in the last episode, so I would nominate her as one of those, because I think she can, she has this history of the MCU that we really didn't learn about until 2015. So I think there's a lot more you can do with like flashbacks and stuff with her. So I think there's more to her in the MCU to come, so I'm really excited for that as well. So I totally agree that she's in. Another name that I just thought of, and I don't know how you feel about this because it kind of crosses over with the animated Batman. Danny Elfman and the theme. It's very iconic. It even crosses over and it's used in as inspiration for the music of Batman the Animated Series. It was reused in Justice League. Uh, I think he was all 4 movies he did the music, I believe. But
you also can't forget that Danny Elfman also did the score for Spider-Man as well.
well, I was going to bring that up as well, but we're kind of talking about the Batman stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I think he's got to go in. Did you have him on the list initially, like later on?
I did not have him on the list. I did not have him on the list initially, but he absolutely belongs. I don't think I can't really think of an argument against him. I mean, I would say the Spider-Man theme. I mean, that was a huge markout moment in No Way Home, is hearing that theme again. And I mean, he literally if you think about the 2 most important fictional characters of the last 30 years, it's Batman and it's Spider-Man, right? Danny Elfman created scores for both. So for those reasons, I think he absolutely belongs.
Yeah, it's a good thing I thought of that just now because like right now is of course at my desk I'm always staring at my Batman pops and I have all the villains in front of me and I just realized, man, Danny Elfman was so like influential of the sound of Batman in the 90s and so influential of the sound of Spider-Man in the early 2000s. So yeah, he's got to be in. I guess where do you go from there? Because I kind of went all over the place after this point. kind of going back to X-Men and Spider-Man.
Let's stay in the Batman universe and let's kind of go through the other Batman adjacent people. Let's say I think Kevin Conroy should go in. I know that he is mostly known for the animated series. He was the voice of Batman in Mask of the Phantasm. I think for a lot of people in our generation, he is Batman more so than Michael Keaton, more so than Adam West, more so than Christian Bale or Ben Affleck, and even more so than Robert Pattinson. I think Kevin Conroy is the definitive Batman for so many people, and he is spectacular with the voice, the way that he differentiates the voice between Bruce Wayne and Batman. And at a time in the 90s when the Batman movies were not putting a heavy emphasis on Batman himself, that is exactly what Mask of the Phantasm did. And Kevin Conroy absolutely did a great job in that movie. And that is a movie that is a movie that is in the Pantheon. And for that reason, I would make a strong argument Kevin Conroy belongs in the Pantheon as well.
I mean, not only that, like he was the voice in Justice League Unlimited, Batman Beyond. It's like it wasn't just Batman the Animated Series. He's done other voices and continuity to the Batman character. He even played Bruce Wayne himself live action in the crossover in the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover. So to see an old bitter Batman that he played and he was just so angry. I don't know why, but when he said he killed Clark Kent, I got excited because I was like, yes, this is a badass different Batman that doesn't give a shit anymore. So I don't know why I marked out for that. I know that's bad, but I just marked out so much when he said that line in the show. So yeah, Kevin Conroy, man, what a legend. And he's still got some time left to do the voice, man. He's probably got a good 10, 15 years left to do the voice. And hell, if you're going to have him still be that continuity and be that Batman, why not do another Batman Beyond revival? Just saying.
That would make Batwaters very happy. I know that they're doing an audio drama with the original cast of Batman the Animated Series, and I know that there is going to be kind of a Batman Animated Series kind of adjacent project. I don't know if Kevin Conroy is going to be doing the voice, though, but I know that Bruce Timm and that crew are actually putting together an animated series for HBO Max that will see what that'll looks like. But yeah, Kevin Conroy belongs on this list. So sticking in the Batman universe, I mentioned there was a name that was not on my list, and I literally thought of it just before we recorded. I can't believe I didn't put this person's name down first. Christopher Nolan. He has 3 movies in our Pantheon, has maybe made the greatest superhero movie of all time, maybe made the greatest superhero origin story of all time, and ruined cinema for the rest of time because everybody wants to make their movies dark and gritty now.
Yeah, he was on my initial list for sure. I almost put Jonathan Nolan as well because I guess I'm trying to remember if he co-wrote all 3 or was it just the first 2. I mean, such a big influence, man, especially directing 3 movies that are in the Pantheon, a trilogy like that. Despite how people feel, I don't know how people feel about, Dark Knight Rises now, because I know people make fun of it and stuff like that. I know Ralph Garman, big Batman lover, hates it, but, to each his own. But I do love his movies, man, and I love his tone and aesthetic. And you're right, it kind of ruined things a little bit. Uh, but I think we're gonna get out of that pretty soon. I think we'll see what this Matt Reeves version kind of comes out. Even though it looks dark as fuck right now, I'm hoping it's more like a detective story, because that's what Nolan kind of got back to the heart of, and that's the detective story aspect of Batman. And that's what I love about Batman comics or graphic novels. Is the one, my favorite one is The Long Halloween, which he took inspiration from for The Dark Knight. So yeah, Nolan has to be in, and I would go on to say Christian Bale and Heath Ledger should be totally in as well.
I will say yes to Heath Ledger. I'm gonna say no to Christian Bale. I know this is gonna be a bit controversial, but I mean, if you want to use your power to put him in when we kind of look at the list at the end, you're welcome to do so. But I think Christian Bale is good. I don't think that he is nearly as iconic comparing him to the Kevin Conroys. I don't think his performance is as good. And I think he's a good Batman, and I think he's a good Bruce Wayne. I just, if I were to look at those 3 movies and say I would have wanted even a little bit more from Christian Bale in terms of the performance. And again, I think he's good, but I don't think he's as memorable either as some of the other performers as well. I think so much of the stars of those movies, I think, are in a lot of ways kind of the aesthetics, and even I would say like a Michael Caine and a Morgan Freeman. Like, I think in a lot of ways they stick out more performance wise than Christian Bale. So I'm gonna say no to Christian Bale, but yes to Heath Ledger. I mean, Heath Ledger won a freaking Academy Award. And yes, the Academy Awards are extremely flawed, but the fact that he won an Academy Award for playing a superhero villain, and of course Joaquin Phoenix has done the same, but for Heath Ledger to do it posthumously, that is an iconic performance that, again, I think kind of broke everyone, and I think a lot of people are kind of they're trying to do it and not being as successful. I'm thinking about you, Jared Leto, and sending dead fish to people, you son of a bitch. But Heath Ledger is great, and he is specifically great in The Dark Knight. And it's unfortunate that not only, did he not get to continue on with his life, never got to see him, in another role, because I think he was poised to be a really huge star partially because of The Dark Knight.
Yeah, it's always going to be one of those things about like Hollywood legends and the what ifs of the world. And a lot of people are going to, mention Heath Ledger in the same breath as like River Phoenix. You know what I mean? So it's one of those Hollywood things. You know what I mean? Tragedy strikes some of the youth in Hollywood, a lot of the youth in Hollywood, actually. But yeah, it's a very tragic story. And, it kind of opened my eyes to like prescription drugs. Like, I didn't know like prescription drugs were such a thing that you can just overdose, quite easily from them. I mean, because that wasn't really a thing for me in college. I was just like a pothead, you know what I mean? So when this happened and when he died, like, I kind of like was like, oh shit, there's this whole other fucking thing going on besides the standard drugs that are going around. So it was very kind of eye opening for that time, especially for me, knowing that he died of a prescription drug overdose. Man, it was freaking nuts still to this day. But with Christian Bale, I feel like when he got casted, it kind of set the tone of like, okay, this is going to be different, because American Psycho, I mean, my God, I mean, we haven't talked about that, but American Psycho was this breakthrough moment, I feel, for Christian Bale to like from art house to, it's an art house movie with like, like a casual prime time audience that went and saw it. It made money. And to go from that, it's like, oh my God, this rich, crazy guy is going to play a rich, crazy guy. And then Machinist came out right before that, I believe, right? And then to see him like just go through all these physical changes for roles and stuff, I feel like Christian Bale kind of set this tone where it's like, we're not going to just cast a big name as Bruce Wayne, even though Ben Affleck took that role, but he did kind of get physically like in shape for the role. But I feel like Christian Bale like changed things a little bit in terms of who you can cast as a Bruce Wayne, because he's very much like, even before he was nominated for Oscars and stuff like that, that was like, probably 3 or 4 years later. He was on pace to be, one of those actors. I mean, Machinist almost got him an Oscar. I don't know if he wasn't actually nominated for Machinist, but Machinist is an incredible physical transformation. If you've never seen that movie, it's crazy. It's all about him having this massive hallucination about his life, I guess, but he's just going through this physical change where he only ate like really apple cores and smoked cigarettes to get to like super, super thin. And then from there to go and get 50 pounds heavier for Batman. Just crazy stuff, man. So I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm not going to use my rule yet, but I'm just going to throw that out there that he kind of changed the perspective to me of who Bruce Wayne can be, because Val Kilmer and Michael Keaton, they were these big name stars. George Clooney, you know what I mean? Big name stars. But Christian Bale wasn't really that big name star. He was this big, art house name that was on the rise. You know what I mean? So it was a little different approach.
You haven't quite convinced me, but I certainly think that he did a very solid job, I would say, of playing this role, and we'll see how this develops. Do you have anybody else from the DC side, just in general? I have one more name that I'm not sure if you're going to agree with, but anybody else from the DC side?
Well, I got Margot Robbie. I think
so we are. That's my name too, Margot.
Well,
Robbie.
Then it's two. It's Gal Gadot and Margot Robbie were my two.
I'm vetoing Gal Gadot, and let's talk about Gal Gadot in a minute. But yes, Margot Robbie, I agree.
Okay, so Margot Robbie, I mean, goddamn, she's tremendous as Harley Quinn. And then, I mean, she wasn't even needed in Suicide Squad 2, and they brought her back, and she did a tremendous job in that. And she's like when little girls and teenage girls think of Harley Quinn now, they're going to think of her immediately, not think of the show from the animated series and that Harley Quinn outfit look. It's more that modern look. And God knows how many little girls and how many women dressed up in the red and blue in 2016, 2017, and that red and blue Harley Quinn look. So yeah, she's still like, an iconic, superhero actress, quote unquote, because like she's still rocking the role as Harley Quinn. She's got another movie coming out as Harley Quinn, probably more Batman related projects or whatever in the DCEU. So she does a tremendous job, and I feel like as a producer as well, she's kind of stepped it up and taken control of the character, as we saw that in Birds of Prey, and I think it worked out really well in Birds of Prey. And we mentioned this last week. We feel like it's probably going to get more steam later on in the years. Like a lot more people are going to realize like it's kind of like this underrated kind of movie. So yeah, I think she does a tremendous job as Harley Quinn, and it's not the level of, Haley, what's her name, Kuko in the animated version?
Kaylee Cuoco. I mean, I think Kaylee Cuoco does a really good job in that version of Harley Quinn, but Margot Robbie just takes it to another level because she also has to represent the physicality, and she is just such a perfect casting choice for that role. It's not just the voice, it's what she has done, changing the character. I think she is one of the few people to have played a character where the movie was actually put into the pile of shame, but still ends up on this list because of how good she is in Birds of Prey as well as The Suicide Squad. I think she is incredible in both of those movies in terms of playing this character, evolving the character. It's unfortunate to me that those movies have not been nearly as financially successful as the first Suicide Squad. But I think when we look back years from now, I said Birds of Prey would get this love. I think the Suicide Squad is also going to be treated in much the same way, that it's going to be looked at as this very underrated superhero movie that's very dark and violent and funny. But Margot Robbie really is at the center of both of those. And I think she is going to continue to play this role in future movies, and I think she's going to continue to do a great job. It's just unfortunate that she really hasn't been in a financially successful version of this character, except for the movie that's really terrible. But nonetheless, Margot Robbie is so good. Yeah, she belongs in.
Yeah, so with Gal Gadot, I feel like she's just like, when anyone thinks of Wonder Woman, it's her. You know what I mean? Like, not a lot of people think of Linda Carter anymore.
I agree with you, but the problem is Wonder Woman 1984 really left a bad taste in my mouth. And for me, thinking about Gal Gadot, I think she's really bad in that movie. I also think it's bad direction, it's bad acting. Also, Gal Gadot's been in a couple of movies since then, and I don't think she's a very good actor. And this is not the Academy Awards, but like part of it is you actually have to be a good actor. I think the reason that the first Wonder Woman movie works is because of the direction, and a lot of it is because of who she is surrounded by. She's surrounded by Robin Wright, and she's surrounded by Chris Pine, and has this great chemistry with him, and just the way she is positioned physically so much better. Wonder Woman 1984, my God, they could not have made Gal Gadot look worse. And I don't know if this is an indictment of Patty Jenkins. I don't know if this is an indictment of Warner Brothers as a studio, but Wonder Woman 1984 actually makes the argument to me that she does not belong in the superhero pantheon.
Interesting, because I feel like as bad as that movie was for me, I still thought she was like this great Wonder Woman. That's what Wonder Woman is. Like she embodies that character.
I see it. I just this if like I think about Christopher Reeves in Superman 4. Superman 4 is terrible. Christopher Reeves is still good in it, though. To me, the difference between that and Wonder Woman 1984, I think Wonder Woman 1984 is a better movie, but I think Gal Gadot's performance is bad. Does that make sense?
I get you. But for me, like, even though it's kind of like a bad performance, it like we talked about this before, it reminds me of like 80s Stallone, 80s Arnold Schwarzenegger. She has this like movie star presence that can carry a movie. And even though I didn't really enjoy it, I felt like she carried the movie. And there were enjoyable parts to it, and they did like, some Amando stuff. But, it was just her just owning that role, and I was just kind of into it, despite me not liking the plot or whatever. It was just me like enjoying Wonder Woman again, you know what I mean? And I really loved her in the Zack Snyder Justice League version because she had all these different scenes, and I loved the stuff with like her in the history with the Amazons, and then her interacting in a different way than what we saw with Cyborg, all those different things. So I think she's like, in the pantheon for me, but again, we'll talk about it at the end and see if I stretch my rule and use my power for that one for the veto. But as of right now, she's not in it, but we'll talk about it in about 20 minutes.
For sure. And I would actually be willing to come around on Gal Gadot. If Wonder Woman 3 is good and it's a return to form and it's as good as the first one, then I will actually make the argument that she does belong. And I would actually say the same thing about Patty Jenkins as well, because it's weird to me. Like, if Wonder Woman 1984 does not exist, I would probably say that Gal Gadot and Patty Jenkins both belong. But Wonder Woman 1984 kind of neutralizes a lot of the good feelings that I have about Wonder Woman. So as you could tell, I have some complicated feelings. So that's it for DC, right? We could go to Marvel.
Pretty sure that's it for DC, because everything else is, I mean, Danny DeVito, not really. You know what I mean?
Yes, Danny DeVito is not going in. All right. So do you want to go OG Marvel here before the MCU?
Okay, because for me, I guess we start with what? You want to start with X-Men and Blade, that era?
I mean, if Wesley Snipes is not on your list, then we're gonna have a problem.
See, he is on my list. It's just I don't know, like, what other director? Oh, it was just 3 different directors, right? So, because I was thinking maybe Guillermo, because I really love Blade 2, but I kind of
really hasn't. I mean, he did Blade 2, he did Hellboy, but none of those movies are really in the pantheon. And I don't think, I think with Tim Burton, even though Batman 89 is not in the pantheon, you can make the argument that he created a very specific aesthetic and contributed. I will be much more differential to kind of the OGs than I will to some of the more modern directors and even some of the modern people. Like, for me, even though Wesley Snipes is not in a pantheon level movie, I think he's a really important figure, and we cannot let Blade be erased from the history books, because, again, when Marvel was not making movies, Blade was kind of a test case. Even before X-Men, Blade was out there. Wesley Snipes belongs on this list, 100%.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too, because I was thinking like Guillermo did a really good, almost great superhero movie, and then a decent superhero movie, and then a good superhero movie. So I was kind of like, but he's a Academy Award-winning director, so that's kind of where I was at. It was like kind of 50-50. So I'm glad we're kind of on the same page as that, because I wasn't fully committed to it, but I was kind of wondering your thoughts. So I guess we go to X-Men at this point, right? Because for me, it's like Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, and Ian McKellen.
So you know that I am not a huge fan of Ian McKellen as Magneto, so I would say no. But I mean, of course, Hugh Jackman is going to be on this list. I mean, I can't think of an argument against Hugh Jackman. Like, if you're going to tell me Wolverine, X-Men Origins Wolverine, which is bad, then I mean, I think Logan makes the argument by itself that Hugh Jackman belongs in this. I would probably have said, even if Logan did not exist, I probably would say he still belongs just because of how important he is to that first X-Men trilogy and Days of Future Past. But I mean, Logan makes this so easy. And I think it's the same thing for Patrick Stewart. Patrick Stewart, I think, would actually maybe be more borderline. But again, I think Logan pushes him over the top. Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart absolutely belong on this list.
Should we mention Kevin Feige right now?
We're going to get into Kevin Feige because I am a firm believer. This
is like the first movie he produced, right?
I would say that Lauren Schuler Donner actually belongs on this list. She is the producer for every X-Men movie since the one that came out in 2000. She has been the producer, one of the leading producers on all of them. She is also the person that hired Kevin Feige to be an associate producer on X2. So, and again, I think we, especially in terms of creatives, we don't really have a lot of women on this list. So I'm a firm believer that she belongs as a producer on this list.
Totally agree. Because that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9 movies. So that in a 20-year span. So yeah, totally worth it. And all of them profitable, despite how we feel about some of them. All of them were profitable, except maybe the last one. But we don't talk about Dark Phoenix around here anymore. So there you go.
Absolutely. So I am putting Ian McKellen onto the out list. So you're gonna have some names to think about. What is your argument for Ian McKellen being on this list? Now, if we were talking about a Lord of the Rings pantheon, then of course Ian McKellen would go on because he's incredible as Gandalf. But it's not a Lord of the Rings list.
To me, he has that feel of Magneto from the show, because that Magneto from the show had that accent, the long hair. This felt like the old version of him. And then when he was even doing the Magneto stuff in the first movie, it felt like, oh wow, this feels like the show. Like that was one of the few times where I was like, this feels like the show, this Magneto. And then his performance, especially in 2, not so much 3, but I think 2, when he's kind of playing the good guy when he's really still the bad guy, and kind of playing them and then influencing not Iceman, his buddy, the fire guy, when he was convincing him to join.
Pyro.
I thought that was a good, it showed you what Magneto was all about. He was still recruiting, you know what I mean? And he's had that look on his face, like, don't trust these humans kind of look, like that disgruntled look on his face that I think that shows years of just dealing with this mutant stuff, that being an enemy of the government kind of gets to you, that as well. I think he had that wear and tear in his face because he was so old at the time playing Magneto. But again, when you bring him to Days of Futures Past and kind of bring it all together, I think in Days of Futures Past, despite him not having a major role because you actually had the new Magneto, but I think in that little time that he kind of had this farewell to the role that I thought was really great, because it showed, like, despite all the shit that Magneto and Professor X have gone through, they came together at the end to save the world. So I thought that was a great little moment, and him sacrificing himself. I think he did a tremendous job in like the 5 minutes he was in that movie. So and people still identify him as like, well, because we have this idea, like, when we think of, like, Wonder Woman, it's Gal Gadot, right? But with Magneto, you can't help but think of Fassbender and Ian McKellen. Maybe more so Ian McKellen, because I think that's even more nostalgic for the fans who love X-Men 2 especially. So that's where I kind of stand on that one, because I don't even have Fassbender on my list, to be honest, because he, as great as he is as Magneto, just something about Ian McKellen is just more nostalgic, I feel.
Yeah, Fassbender's not on my list either, and that's probably because he's not all that great, except for First Class. I think he's fine in Days of Future Past. I don't think he's good in either Apocalypse or Dark Phoenix. So that's kind of where I come down on it. And I think in terms of the other X-Men, James Marsden is not going in. Famke Jensen's not going in. You could maybe make an argument for Brian Cox, but I think that in terms of the most iconic performances, it is really just Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart. And I think for me, Ian McKellen is kind of on the border, not getting on this list. But I think in terms of the X-Men, I think that's it.
Well, I just thought of a name just now, and you just thought of that name before the show recorded, so this is the name I just thought of now. Ryan Reynolds, Deadpool, technically the X-Men universe. He's kind of become iconic lately in the last 5 years, and every time I go to Target, every time I go to Walmart, there's usually some Deadpool merch, something like that, and it usually involves tacos or something stupid like that, or a donkey, or alternative covers to other movies with Deadpool placed on top of their faces. So, yeah, I guess I got to go with Ryan Reynolds as well, and I thought I would never say that 5 years ago, or maybe even when we started the podcast. But
I think Deadpool is one of the most important, and I am not a huge fan of Deadpool 2, and the fact that I think there's still so much of a concern about bringing him into the MCU, I am intrigued by this idea. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm very intrigued. I think Deadpool, in good ways and bad, I think it kind of changed the way that we think of superhero movies, kind of bringing back R-rated superhero movies, not in the way that like Spawn and garbage like that, but like actual good, funny, like hard R comedic superhero movies. I think it really kind of set the stage for something like The Suicide Squad in a lot of ways. So yeah, I think Ryan Reynolds has to go on this list, despite his appearance in Wolverine X-Men Origins.
Totally, for sure. And I know this is like a little weird sidetrack, but I feel like Bob Ross, that painter from the 70s and 80s on that local TV show, he got more popular, I feel, because Deadpool made fun of him in the last couple of years. Because now I see.
I would say that he got more popular because he's being exploited, and there's an entire Netflix documentary that covers that exploitation. But
oh, I know, I've looked up the documentary, but I just feel like because I go to just random sections in Target and like I just see like Bob Ross stuff. Like whether it's a shirt,
right?
Or like a pop.
That's because they're merchandising him all to hell, and they're doing.
I feel like it started with Deadpool. It kind of started with Deadpool, I feel, but that's just kind of maybe not noticing. But
I mean, I would say that it's because he's being exploited. I think his show definitely has taken off in the streaming era because people are looking up clips on YouTube, and I believe the show was on Netflix or something of that nature. But yeah, I mean, it's Bob Ross would never have wanted the kind of cheap ass merchandise that you're getting, the Chia Pets, the paint, all that stuff. Yeah, it's just it's capitalism at its worst. And it's funny because the same thing is happening to Stan Lee as well.
Yeah, and Deadpool seems to just embrace it all. So that's kind of the contrast there. Let's go on to the Spider-Man universe, I guess, and
specifically the Sam Raimi universe. I would say
Sam Raimi universe.
I have 4 names from the Sam Raimi universe.
See, I only had 2 because I wasn't sure if like because my 2 are Sam Raimi and Tobey Maguire. I love Alfred Molina. Yeah, I love Alfred Molina, and I love Green Goblin, Willem Dafoe. So it's really tough because, like, we talked about that recency bias, not adding Spider-Man 3 scenes to the list of top 10 action scenes of all time, but because I really loved a lot of the scenes in that movie as well, so we didn't include it. And the reason I'm not including their names now is because is it the nostalgia that I'm feeling for Alfred Molina? You know what I mean? Because I really love him and he got the redemption that he wanted. Am I feeling the nostalgia of Willem Dafoe having an incredible performance, that I watched 3 weeks ago in a new Marvel movie? So that's why I didn't really include those 2, which are probably your 2.
Well, you are actually forgetting an important name, and I'm not, but I'm going to wait to shame you. Here's the thing about Willem Dafoe. I think he's really great in the first Spider-Man. I think No Way Home pushes him over the edge. But you're also forgetting about the fact that he was very good in the Aquaman movie as well, playing a completely different character. So I think the fact that his appearance in Aquaman actually helps him kind of push him a little bit over the top, and No Way Home does the same. I think he's an iconic villain. I think he is not somebody who is in these superhero movies just to collect a paycheck. He was in No Way Home for a lot of it. He was in Aquaman. He played that mentor role really well. So for me, I think Willem Dafoe absolutely belongs on this list.
Okay, so it's not just me being like really nostalgic because I saw the movie 3 weeks ago, because I did forget about Aquaman as well. So we agree on that. He's on. Alfred
Oh yeah,
Molina.
Willem Dafoe is an easy choice. Alfred Molina, I'm not sold as much. Maybe we can revisit this at another time, but I would say no to Alfred Molina.
So for me personally, yes, but I can see why it's a no right now. Because again, I really love that Doc Ock character, and I just saw the movie. So again, it could be just the nostalgia running through my veins right now. So we'll keep him on the out list. The other name I'm probably forgetting right now is J. Jonah Jameson, right? Is that?
That's who I was going to shame you.
Okay.
I mean, here's the thing. J.K. Simmons has to go on this list if for no other reason than they have not recast this role. Like, even when it came down to the MCU is going to have J. Jonah Jameson in this universe, what do? They literally brought J.K. Simmons back. I think he is easily the most memorable part of the 3 Spider-Man movies, and he's not even really that involved with the main action. Yeah, J.K. Simmons belongs on this list. In terms of supporting characters, he is an all-timer.
Okay, for sure. Because there's also that one moment in Spider-Man 2 that always gets me, and I never realized and picked up on before, is that the fact that he covers up the identity of Peter Parker. Like, who's got the pictures on Spider-Man? I don't know. Some guy sends them in, so he totally protected Peter Parker in that moment, despite how he treats him kind of like shit and yells at them a lot. But it showed you what the true character was in that moment. So I thought that was a nice little moment that I always kind of forget. But upon rewatching the Sam Raimi trilogy recently, I totally picked up on that moment. Like, yeah, J. Jonah Jameson is much more complex than we thought. So I'm glad that he's in this universe as well, but in kind of like this Alex Jones form, which is ridiculous. But I thought it was really interesting as well in the movie that he went from his basement to a full studio. But I think that's just because whenever you do breaking news, you probably got to do it from the home studio anyway. So I know some people were complaining about that as like some continuity errors, but I think that's just kind of like a real thing in the real world right now. So that's all the names from the Raimi universe, I believe, right? Because I think.
Well, yes, I agree that Sam Raimi and Tobey Maguire belong on this list, but I do think we should spend at least a little bit of time kind of talking about it. I think Tobey Maguire, I think he gets the dorky aspects of Spider-Man down pat really well. And I still think I think he was too old to play Spider-Man in 2002, and now even more so that he's a man in his 50s, for God's sakes. But I think he got a lot of the charm of the character across, and just that desperation to be liked. I think he had really good chemistry with Kirsten Dunst, and I think, yeah, Tobey Maguire belongs. And I mean, Sam Raimi, I think a lot of what the MCU does in terms of their movie making, I think they've stolen a lot of that from Sam Raimi. I think as far as the look and the tone, I think they get a lot of that from the Sam Raimi movies. Maybe more than we want to admit. And Sam Raimi can actually add to his legacy by directing Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Like, this could also contribute to his standing. But for the first 2 Spider-Man movies alone, Raimi belongs on this list.
Absolutely. And the fact that in Spider-Man 2, we had that horror little mini scene in the middle where Dr. Octopus wakes up and kills all those people in the surgical room. That's classic Sam Raimi right there. Shout out to Evil Dead 1. Not really a fan of Evil Dead 2. I know that's really controversial. I love Army of Darkness. So, yeah, just I love that aesthetic and feel he brought to it. And, with Tobey Maguire, like I said, to me, Spider-Man is a college kid, and he was a college kid a lot, and especially 2. Like, that was, to me, that's why 2 is so beloved for me, is because it connected so much with the show and the themes of the show, and that struggle and that balance that he's trying to keep of being a student, being a regular normal person, having a love life, and being Spider-Man. And that's what I love about Spider-Man 2. So
yeah, and the fact that the best action sequence, I mean, it was number 1 on your list, it was number 3 on my list, Spider-Man on the train. That is a huge showcase for both Raimi and Maguire.
Absolutely. And I made the joke that his arm's probably going to ripped off in real life, but yeah, that scene is iconic through and through. So on to, well, I don't know. Do we go to the?
Let's do the MCU protagonists. I have 6 MCU protagonists. No, 7. 7 that are going to go on the list if I have my way.
Okay, let's start with you because I kind of went. All I had was just Robert Downey Jr. I was kind of like, Chris Evans. Let's see what happens in a couple of years.
I think Chris Evans is kind of donezo, but I mean, the Captain America trilogy is arguably the most important trilogy within that franchise in terms of what it did. The second Captain America kind of broke Hydra and Shield wide open. Chris Evans got to have his final dance with Haley Atwell. That's a big moment. I mean, Chris Evans going in this thing seems incredibly obvious to me. I think he is in one of the more memorable origin stories as far as the aesthetic, both his personal aesthetic and the movie's aesthetic. I mean, I think Chris Evans is going to be the Captain America for so many people. And with all due respect, I don't think anybody's ever going to be able to top it. So I think Chris Evans has to go in. I think Robert Downey Jr. has to go in. I think Samuel L. Jackson has to go in. I mean, he did not invent the post-credit scene, but when people think of the post-credit scene, they're always going to think of Samuel L. Jackson in that moment, talking about how there is talking about the Avengers Initiative and how Iron Man and Tony Stark is part of a greater world. So yeah, Sam Jackson, Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth. I think even though he's not done as Thor, I think he absolutely belongs because of Thor Ragnarok, the evolution of that character through that movie, as well as the 2 Avengers movies. I think Chris Hemsworth absolutely belongs in. I think Scarlett Johansson should go in as Black Widow, even though the Black Widow character maybe didn't get the justice that she deserved because she's kind of an Avengers OG. I think she belongs in. I also think 2 characters that were just introduced in the MCU in 2016 in the same movie also belong in, that being Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther, Tom Holland as Spider-Man.
Okay, I'm on board with almost all of them except maybe Hemsworth because, I mean, his role as Thor wasn't memorable until Ragnarok. You know what I mean? And he's still got one more movie left in the Thor role for all we know. And I hope he sticks to the landing. You know what I mean? Because I hope it's not just this one-time thing where they got everything right. And I know Taika Waititi is an incredible director. But going back to that and kind of recreating that magic is what I'm afraid of, because that's what happened with Wonder Woman 84. So we'll see. I would say not in right now. But if Thor 4 lands it and has that good landing and kind of puts that ends I don't know if he ends the Thor franchise or ends the Thor story, but if it does it right, especially with Natalie Portman coming back, considering Natalie Portman wasn't really a big fan of the first 2 movies, she didn't come back for the 3rd movie. They brought her back in B-roll footage for Endgame. The fact that she's coming back in a bigger role, I think, speaks a lot to the story. So I'm gonna say no on Hemsworth now, but I'm pretty sure after Thor 4, if they stick the landing, he'll definitely be in it for sure, because it's like I said, Thor 1, 2. Avengers 1 and 2, that's 4 movies as Thor where it wasn't it wasn't a plus, level Thor that we got in Ragnarok. It took a while to get there. So it wasn't this great thing off the bat. You know what I mean? So I kind of have to take some points down for that because it took a while and it took Taika Waititi to bring that out of him. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. Chris Evans, I totally agree with. Samuel L. Jackson, I just completely forgot about, and yeah, how important he is to the Marvel franchise, you know what I mean? So he was the backbone of putting the team together and everything, and he is iconic in terms of thinking of after credit scenes. And now every major franchise has after credit scenes because of that one scene. So yeah, for sure he's totally in. Chadwick Boseman, of course, he's in. He was on my list as well. What can you say? He's a legend. We had a whole month dedicated to him. Tom Holland, especially now with No Way Home, and the performance he put in that. And that's probably his best performance as Spider-Man. I don't know if it's his best performance as an actor because I haven't seen all his work, but a lot of people have been saying, or a lot of critics have been saying, it's his best performance as an actor, especially the scene where he's meeting the 2 other Spider-Man and just wants this, he wants revenge, and they're trying to talk him out of it. And he was going through all the emotions through that. So he did a tremendous job in that as well. Scarlett Johansson, of course, I think she totally belongs in. Another name I forgot because I was just kind of like, that's like second ballot kind of level for me. But if we're gonna throw her on, let's throw her on now. Even her gone from the MCU now, her legacy is still being felt in the shows. You know what I mean? We're gonna get callbacks to her whenever we see Elena, whenever Hawkeye goes to visit the gravesite or the memorial or whatever. So there's always going to be callbacks to her. It's just like she's never going to be gone.
And the thing is that there was considerable backlash because, Spider-Man Far From Home had this big Tony Stark kind of hanging over the movie. And it's like, well, what about Scarlett Johansson? And what about Black Widow? And it seems like Marvel is apologizing, with the Black Widow solo movie, with what they did in Hawkeye. It just feels like, not that they're going back to the well, but it feels like they are trying to atone for their past mistakes. I think I'm higher on the Black Widow movie than a lot of other people, even though I don't necessarily know if it's a great Black Widow movie. But I mean, Scarlett Johansson, I think she stuck around for a lot of years. And, she's defended herself in terms of the court case against Disney. Yeah, she has to go in. It's kind of a rough going because I feel like she laid down the path, and Florence Pugh, Haley Steinfeld, and Gemma Chan are going to reap the benefits that Scarlett Johansson started. That's my feeling.
Yeah, I feel that as well. Totally.
I mean, if we do this list in 3 years, Florence Pugh, Haley Steinfeld, and Brie Larson are absolutely going to be going on this list.
Yeah, for sure. And
maybe even Elizabeth Olsen. Like I almost put Elizabeth Olsen down, but I mean, the only argument that I would make is that she was great on WandaVision. She really doesn't have a lot to her character, but if she's in other stuff, I could see putting Elizabeth Olsen on here.
Yeah, a lot of this newer generation heroes, I can totally see them. Especially because with Brie Larson, she only had the one movie, and then she wasn't hardly in Endgame at all. Like, so that was kind of unfortunate. I thought a missed opportunity there. But yeah, in terms of the Marvels, she's going to be that leader and that mentor role for the other new Marvels in the movie, other Miss Marvels. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And I think you're right. I think in like 3 years, we're going to look back and add some more names to the list. But is that all for the protagonists? Because I feel like we're forgetting people, but I don't know. Maybe it's just
I don't think so in terms of the protagonists. I don't think that Mark Ruffalo necessarily belongs on this list, even though I think he does a solid job as Hulk. I've never been sold on Jeremy Renner's performance either. Benedict Cumberbatch, I think he's fine as Doctor Strange, but like I'm not over the moon about his work, and maybe we could revisit it at some point. But yeah, I think that I think everybody's solid, but I think in terms of the OG Avengers, I think that's who belongs in, and we can kind of come back and talk about again, talking about Florence Pugh and Haley Steinfeld and Brie Larson and even Shang-Chi as well. I mean, that's definitely someone that we will probably be taking into consideration because being the first Asian superhero in a lead, that's a big deal. And Gemma Chan as well.
For sure. So I guess let's go on to the villains. I mean, obviously Tom Hiddleston, right? And
I don't think there's really an argument against it. I mean, it's got to be Tom Hiddleston, right?
Yeah, Tom Hiddleston, and I guess, I mean, let me think. I mean, Josh Brolin to an extent because how iconic the snap became.
Right.
In
Yeah,
terms of
I mean,
pop culture.
the snap became a meme, and even now, it's not just the shows, but there are people now talking about the idea that Thanos was right, and this is a legit thing. I also think the way they rendered that character was great. I think James Brolin's performance as Thanos is really great. He could have very easily become a cartoon character. He looks like a cartoon character, but James Brolin really tempers his performance. I think it's actually underrated. I think he does a really good job playing that role. And in a lot of ways, I don't think that they're ever going to top it in terms of that character. And I know Jonathan Majors is going to do a great job as Kang. I don't know if he's ever going to be able to top what James Brolin did as Thanos. And the other name that I had was Michael B. Jordan because he plays the one MCU villain that was right.
I'm going to say no because it's just one movie and we don't know if he's actually coming back, but I don't know. Based on that one movie, I don't know if I can say fully because I feel like there could have been so much more with that character, and they cut him off too quickly, and they cut his legs off too quickly. You know, by killing him. So I don't know. I just feel like there
I
was so
think
much more
in terms,
potential, but they didn't go with it fully enough for like multiple movies. You know what I mean? Like that's why I'm not so
I
sure I want to
actually
put him on the list.
appreciate the fact that he was a one movie character, and I actually think it takes a lot of guts for them to say this character. He served his purpose in terms of making I mean, his death actually impacts the protagonist in a positive way because he takes the parts that were like Michael B. Jordan's character, Killmonger, was not wrong. And I think that Black Panther in the end kind of makes the decision that he is not wrong and makes some changes and some positive changes. So that's kind of where I'm at. But it is tough being in one movie. But I think with the villains generally, they're not in like Tom Hiddleston is an exception. Like we really haven't gotten a lot of other MCU villains in multiple movies. Like even Michael Keaton, yes, he's going to have a cameo in Morbius. He was he's basically been in cameos, but even he's really only been in one MCU movie. So I think in some ways, I think the bar is a little bit different. But I mean, I think the Michael B. Jordan performance in Black Panther is pretty iconic. But certainly, I will be able to put somebody in over your objections, and that may be it. That it'll be either him or Hemsworth, and I'm going to definitely think about it.
Okay, for sure. Because and then I got my names too, as like Gal Gadot, Ian McKellen, and Christian Bale to think about as well. So
Yep. But yeah,
okay.
Hiddleston, of course, Tom Hiddleston goes in. Yes.
So from this point, I think we got to talk about. Well, he's a slash actor as well, but Jon Favreau, of course, I think deserves totally to be in it.
Yeah, the only names that I have left are people that I'm calling MCU creatives, and that includes Jon Favreau, who he is also on my list. You could almost make the argument that Happy Hogan is kind of a connective tissue. I don't necessarily think that he is not a crucial part of the MCU in terms of acting, but in terms of directing the first Iron Man, being a producer on a number of the other MCU movies, I will forgive him for Iron Man 2 because what he did in Iron Man 1 is so important.
Not only that, the fact that he was on screen with both Daredevils that have been theatrical Daredevils on screen in the same scene together, just mind-blowing stuff.
You're never going to let that go as long as you live.
Dude, how crazy is that? And not only that, he learned that MCU style from those deleted scenes that we talked about in Daredevil, because those Daredevil deleted scenes are very MCU, like oriented, and I feel like Favreau learned a lot, especially from Daredevil, in terms of what to do for Iron Man. So that's how it all connects to me. But also, the Russo brothers, I believe, have to be on there.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of shat on them last week when I talked about the not great directing of action. But if you look at the movies that are in the Pantheon, Captain America: Winter Soldier, Captain America: Civil War, Avengers: Infinity War, Avengers: Endgame, all four of those movies have the same directors. They also have the same screenwriters as well, which I'll get to in a second. But yes, just if for no other reason than what they were able to navigate. And again, they are not as visually interesting directors as maybe Joss Whedon, but I think that they were more suited for this style of filmmaking compared to Joss Whedon in terms of, kind of doing some IP management, managing all the characters. Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame, I think, are miracles of pacing and editing. And I think you, of course, give credit to the editors. But what the Russos were able to pay off in those Captain America and Avengers movies, absolutely the Russos belong.
Totally agree with that. I think that's all the directors in terms of.
I've got two more directors, but Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely. I'm going to tell you the movies that they wrote, Brian, and then you can tell me what your feelings are. So not a good start. Thor: The Dark World. Okay, not great. Captain America: Winter Soldier, Captain America: Civil War, Avengers: Infinity War, and Avengers: Endgame.
Yeah,
I think
I'm on board.
Marcus and McFeely belong in.
Totally, because I remember when I think Endgame came out, and they had this appearance on the Kevin Smith, Mark Bernard, and Fat Man Beyond show, and they were at the bar, and they were doing this interview, and they were kind of like giving away some spoilers unintentionally. But the reason that they go back to Thor: The Dark World is because they wrote it, and they had this thing where like they wanted people to go back to it and kind of like look at it in a different light with all these kind of retcons that were going around with it. That's why they went to specifically back to that movie, because they wrote it. So that's why they mentioned that. And they mentioned also, I don't know if you noticed or picked up on this, but in Star Trek 6, I believe, when there was like the final cast for the original crew in Star Trek 6, they had the signatures for the names at the end. And they got that directly and took it and put it in the end game. And that was their idea to do it. And they was like, oh yeah, we got that idea from Star Trek 6. So they were just tying in all these different pop culture stuff and references to other things. And I know Thor: The Dark World is not the best written script ever, but I feel like with a different director, you could have taken that kind of script and kind of done some more with it, just with a different director. But I do like the retconning, because now when you go back, it makes, you see with a different perspective, knowing the time travel changes that goes on in Endgame. So, and that's all because of their writing, and all the payoffs are because of them. And they're really good dudes. Like, they come off as good dudes. Like, they come off as like fans like us. They're just, sitting around writing and getting orders from Kevin Feige on what to do. So yeah, I'm glad you named them on this list as well.
So the two other directors I have James Gunn, because of Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy was nothing. Like, obscure 70s superheroes, really didn't mean a lot. He created a movie and a franchise that is one of the most important in the MCU. Like, if I had told you that Rocket Raccoon would be one of the most important characters in the concluding movie of the first part of the MCU, I think you would have called me crazy. It's because of James Gunn that happened. There is no way that the Guardians of the Galaxy would have ever played a role in an Avengers movie if it was not for James Gunn. And for that reason alone, I think he belongs into this list. I also think the Suicide Squad is really good. Legitimately, one of my 10 favorite movies of 2021 is the Suicide Squad. And I know it did not do as well as the box office as it deserved, whether it was because of HBO Max, because of the crappy original movie, some of the confusion. I don't know what it is, but that movie is really very good as well. And I know that we still have Guardians of the Galaxy 3 to come out, as well as the holiday special, just for making Guardians of the Galaxy relevant, and also expanding into the DCEU and rescuing the Suicide Squad as well. James Gunn belongs on the list.
Yeah, I can't believe I forgot to put him on the first ballot Hall of Fame list. But yeah, you're absolutely 100% right. And not only that, but the fact that Rocket is an Avenger, you know what I mean? I can't get that out of my head, that he's an Avenger, and that like he's got to send like correspondence messages to the Avengers, because if you look in the end of Guardians of the Galaxy, or at the end of Endgame, when he goes off with the Guardians again, he's still a member of the Avengers. So there's going to be something to that. So just mind-blowing stuff, and the fact that he got Bradley Cooper and Vin Diesel, and they hardly promote the movie at all, because anytime you see any of the promotional stuff, it's usually the other actors. But yeah, James Gunn, a hell of a director. If you've never seen Slither, I recommend checking it out, despite how gross it is. It'll make you kind of squirm a little bit, because it's kind of like this body horror alien comedy, like the ones from the 80s, like Night of the Comet or whatever. So yeah, just check it out. It's very disgusting and gross, but I totally recommend it.
So in my view, I don't know what Black Panther 2 is going to look like, and it could be a disaster. The thing is that even if that movie isn't good, whether it's because Letitia Wright won't get vaccinated, because of Chadwick Boseman's untimely passing, I am of the opinion Black Panther won multiple Academy Awards. I am of the belief that Black Panther is one of the most culturally significant movies, not just superhero movies that have been done over the course of the last decade. I think for that reason alone, I think Ryan Coogler also belongs in.
I'll say yes, because I was kind of hesitant at first, because it's like, well, he's only had one movie, but that one movie is your favorite Marvel movie, Brian. So yeah, it's but it's not on my list, so I get it. But it's just one movie. It's just so hard, because it's I don't know. It's just because like a lot of these directors were putting on are multiple. You know what I mean? And here's the one, but and I know this is not part of it, but Creed is a big part of my, one of my favorite movies of the last 10 years. So, and I know that's not really superhero related, but I mean, still, he's an incredible director. And the shit he's going through right now, making Black Panther 2, despite all the obstacles and this labor of love. So, yeah, I was kind of hesitant because I wanted to see Black Panther 2 first before I officially, put him in, going back later on. But yeah, I'll say it now because, again, it's like, it is my favorite Marvel movie still to this day, and it stands on its own. It doesn't need to have the viewer look at all these other Marvel movies, you know what I mean, to get into the story. It's like its own singular story with some loose Marvel references that the audience will get if you're like a smart mark like us. But for a casual viewer, when, I remember that night I saw Black Panther, and a lot of casual viewers that day, and a lot of them didn't even realize that Black Panther's dad, T'Chaka, had died in the previous movie. So when that happened and there was all these gasps and like shock, I was like, oh shit, these people don't know what's up. So this is going to be an entirely different feel for this movie. And then just ended up having this emotional journey throughout. So I'll agree with that one, Ryan Coogler. Yeah, I think that's, well, because now I was thinking about John Watts, but I think that's, John Watts still has to direct the Fantastic Four movie yet to come.
If he gives us a good Fantastic Four movie, then I will say put him in by all means. But yeah,
because that's going to be a miracle. You know what I mean? We have yet to have a very good Fantastic Four movie, not counting.
For me, the other thing about Ryan Coogler is that if every movie just getting onto the screen is a miracle. If Black Panther 2 is a miracle, then Ryan Coogler deserves all the awards and all the money, because that is going to be a very tough sell. And it's COVID, it's Boseman's death, it's Letitia Wright's behavior. I mean, it's a lot. And I am very concerned about that movie, because I love the first Black Panther, and the idea that a second Black Panther is going to be ruined because of an actor behaving, not wanting to get vaccinated. I mean, I just think it's really shitty. It's really, really shitty. So I'm very concerned, but I still think he belongs, just because. I mean, this movie got nominated for Best Picture. This is the only MCU movie to be nominated for Best Picture. So I think for that reason as well, I think it belongs on this list. And I mean, it won a SAG award too. Like, and I think we've given the credit to the actors, certainly Chadwick Boseman. Hopefully, and I think in the ideal world at this point, rewrite the script, have Lupita Nyong'o become Black Panther, so we can put her on this list as well. That is my hope at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we covered pretty much all the directors. I'm actually having a name that pop up in my head that I completely forgot when we were talking about composers.
I mean, I think Kevin Feige, I don't think we officially put him in, but we could do that now. Kevin Feige, of course, is in. I don't think we need to say why.
Of course. I mean, he was there from the start of the X-Men, so he's learned it all. My two names that I want to add, Hans Zimmer, because I totally forgot about him and how influential he's been on every movie soundtrack since The Dark Knight came out. Like, not even superhero movies, but like every blockbuster tentpole movie. Like, well, we got to get Hans Zimmer, and he's done a bunch of them, even the Pirates movies. So I think he's got to be on the list, because even right now, like, his Dark Knight score is still iconic to the point where my buddy is still like working out to it. He says that's one of his best workout music that he listens to is the Dark Knight soundtrack from 2008. Also, Alan Silvestri, because that Avengers score, man, is so iconic. And when you heard that theme, especially in Endgame, at the right moments, it just elevated it to another level with that theme. And I love Alan Silvestri, but not some of his scores are the best for me. Like, I really don't like Predator, and I don't like his score for Predator. I know that's very controversial, but it just doesn't match.
You're wrong. I mean, that score is great. I love the Predator.
I mean, it's a good score. It just doesn't match what's going on in the jungle, and I'm just like,
I could not disagree with you more.
Well, there you go. And I love Predator 2 because I don't know, Predator 2 like works in the concrete jungle for me. So that's kind of where I am in the Predator movies, but I feel like Hans Zimmer and Alan Silvestri deserve to be on the list.
Yeah, I don't really have anything else. I'm not going to dispute it. I mean, I think The Dark Knight Rises, I mean, undoubtedly are iconic scores, and he was a huge part of them. He also did the Man of Steel score, which I don't like Man of Steel, but I think It's not John Williams, but I think that's a really good score too. I'm also adding Michael Giacchino to the list because just like Danny Elfman, Michael Giacchino will have officially done both Spider-Man and Batman because he is doing the score for The Batman. He did the scores for all three of the MCU Spider-Man. And Brian, of course, what else did he do?
The Planet of the Apes. Is that because that's
No.
such
So
an amazing
we're talking
story.
in the
All three of them.
superhero. In the superhero on Brian, this is a big one.
Wait, am I forgetting something really important?
The Incredibles.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay, so he's definitely on the list. And if you haven't heard that little sample from the trailer of the Batman, he's got it down. It's like this weird piano tempo. You know what I mean? He's got this weird, eerie. It feels like a detective story when I hear it. So that's a good thing. I think we're it. Is that it? I think
That's it for me. We can always come back to this list in a year or so, but who are you going to put in, Brian? Who are you going to put in by yourself? Your choices based on what I have Christian Bale, Gal Gadot, Ian McKellen, and Alfred Molina. Those are the people that you wanted in, and I said no to.
I'm gonna go with Gal Gadot because I feel like her role as Wonder Woman is kind of like more influential and important than Christian Bale did because she's like the first theatrical Wonder Woman, and a lot of little girls, teenage girls, look up to her as like an idol. You know what I mean? And I feel like, she, like I mentioned before, she might not be the best actress, but she's got a movie star presence that can carry a movie, despite how bad it is. You know what I mean? Like, I haven't watched the Netflix movie whatever with Dwayne Johnson and Ryan Reynolds, and I heard it's terrible. But if I have to sit down one day and watch it and force myself to watch it, I'll probably enjoy the Gal Gadot parts because she sells movies for me, man. So, that's kind of how I feel about it.
So I am of the opinion that Chris Hemsworth is going to go in at some point because of Thor: Love and Thunder, and I'm assuming that he's going to do another MCU movie at some point. So I feel like as weird as it is for Chris Hemsworth to not go in, I feel like at some point he is. So I'm going to use mine for Michael B. Jordan because I do not believe, unless we are talking about what if, he is really going to be a part of any other MCU projects. So I am putting in Michael B. Jordan because I think in terms of being a villain, I think it is an iconic performance. And I think he is probably one of the best MCU villains that's ever been. And it's because he was kind of right. So I think, and the fact that he affected so much change in the protagonist. And I mean, Michael B. Jordan is just so good in Ryan Coogler movies. If you watch him in Fruitvale Station, Creed, Black Panther, nobody gets better performances out of Michael B. Jordan than Ryan Coogler. So I am putting in Michael B. Jordan.
Totally cool with that, and potentially to be the new Superman and one of these, I don't know, J.J. Abrams produced Superman movies that are supposed to come out in the next 2 years. He's kind of connected to that, or he's doing his own. I don't know, but
he's doing Creed. He is doing Creed 3. So Michael B. Jordan is directing Creed 3, and Jonathan Majors is going to be in it.
Wait, they announced that? Oh shit, I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So.
Oh my god, that's going to be great. That's going to be great.
Yeah.
Because
Jonathan Majors is going to be a major star, and
from what I've heard, and this is kind of like this theory that if you're like the leading star of a franchise, and this is what Sylvester Stallone did, if you're in it and the studio really needs you to come back and you really want to start doing your directing chops, just say, if I'm coming back, I'm directing the movie. You know what I mean? That's what Stallone did.
Well, I mean, he's clearly interested in being a creative. So that's what's
perfect. That's exactly what, Stallone did. And I believe, William Shatner did in one of the Star Trek movies, and Leonard Nimoy, but we don't want to talk about that. But yeah, he's got a lot of potential, and I'm excited for him as a director as well, because I think he's learned a lot from Coogler, and he's probably learned a lot from all the other directors he's worked with. So I guess that list is complete. Like, I have the list in front of me. Should I read it out loud right now?
Go for it, Brian. Read the entire list of our people that are in the Superhero Pantheon.
Christopher Reeves, Margot Kidder, Gene Hackman, Richard Donner, John Williams, Adam West, Michael Keaton, Tim Burton, Jack Nicholson, Michelle Pfeiffer, Danny Elfman, Kevin Conroy, Christopher Nolan, Heath Ledger, Margot Robbie, Wesley Snipes, Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, Lauren Donner, Ryan Reynolds, Willem Dafoe, J.K. Simmons, Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr., Samuel L. Jackson, Scarlett Johansson, Chadwick Boseman, Josh Brolin, Tom Hiddleston, Jon Favreau, the Russo brothers, Marcus and McFeely, James Gunn, Ryan Coogler, Kevin Feige, Hans Zimmer, Alan Silvestri, Michael Giacchino, Gal Gadot, and Michael B. Jordan.
I believe you forgot Tobey Maguire and Sam Raimi. They're also on the list as well.
I probably forgot to type that, but yeah, that's because, definitely on the list as well. So those are all the names, everybody. It's a lot we went through, but there's a lot of history.
It's a lot of superhero history, and that's what we've done on this podcast for the last 3 years, is covered the movies, the scenes, the performances that mean the most to us. So that's going to be about it for us. So 2 weeks from now, we are going to be talking about the first 2 episodes of the 1994 Spider-Man TV show that aired on Fox Kids. Not Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, not the 80s Spider-Man show that isn't very good, or the 1967 one that gave us the meme, the 1994 Spider-Man. Yeah, looking forward to it. Any other final thoughts, Brian?
I think Vincent D'Onofrio would have been a shoo-in if he was in if he was in the movies, but we're not really basing it on the shows. So I think if anyone was going to be mentioned from the Netflix shows, it's Vincent D'Onofrio and probably Charlie Cox. I think the others.
Kristen, I would say Kristen Ritter is definitely someone that.
I just didn't watch season 2, but I loved her in season 1. I just never watched season 2, so it's hard to say that. You know what I mean? But even though I've only seen 2 seasons of Daredevil, I can definitely say Vincent D'Onofrio, and especially seeing him in Hawkeye. But again, we can't really count that yet because of its TV nature. And we haven't really reviewed those for the Pantheon anyway, which is probably something in the future. But as of right now, if we had to put one in, I think we both agree it's Vincent D'Onofrio.
All righty. So for Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again in 2 weeks.
So no love for Ben Affleck for being both Daredevil and Batman?